Morning of September 6th, 2025, Calvin Castine and Judy Castine along with me. We're at the old base oval at the former Plattsburgh Air Force Base, and looks like folks been gathering here for at least an hour at 6:12 a.m. Sun is about to show its face. We had some damp spots back in Champlain, but it's a little bit wetter here in Plattsburgh. But the weatherman and women, they both said that the rain will hold off till 9 o'clock or so, maybe even closer to 10. So the actual program here for the North Country Honor Flight shouldn't be interrupted by raindrops. So we're here for the takeoff, the send-off ceremony for the September honor flights. There'll be one more send-off this year. That'll be in early October. Looks like a bus is arriving that may or may not contain some veterans. The parade of police escort and motorcycles should be arriving within 10 minutes or so. But there's already so many people gathered here. Lots of folks have gotten here early, so it's a great early turnout. And of course, there's a whole lot more folks to come before this flight to send-off is completed. Let's take a look at the early gatherers here. I can hear the sirens in the background that always come with the grand entrance here, the Thunder in the Berg, they call it. I'm going to get a little closer, see if we can get a glimpse of the list of veterans who will be flying today. They send off 2 flights at each of these send-off ceremonies. And we'll see if we can figure out if there's anybody that we know personally. We were briefly over that way, trying to gather a little information, and we heard the sirens, and sometimes they sound like they're right around the corner, and then other times they sound like they're in the distance. So rather than get surprised and miss the start of the Thunder in the Berg parade, we thought we'd wander over here and get in position. But as you can see from that big tent and some of the smaller tents, it takes a lot of effort. People are here, I'm sure, late yesterday setting up, making sure these tents were ready to go. They always make sure the veterans are under a tent, so whether it's just to protect them from the hot air, the cold air, or raindrops. And there's equipment. Larry Ebert's equipment is out here, his speakers, amplifiers, and so on. So they got to be covered. So a lot of preparation goes in this, and of course the veterans are here every time. Post 912 from Rouse's Point, the veterans, the Sons of the Legion, the auxiliary, they're all here taking part in this. Other legions are also involved. I believe Legion 1618, or 1619 I should say, 1619 is sending off one of the flights today. And they have a whole lot of their members that are going on one of the flights.
Challenge you, I don't need the videotape.
The parade has arrived here. Let's check the time. 6:28 according to my watch. And they are making a noise. The arrival of most, if not all, of the veterans. Not sure if there's any seated under the tent right now or not, but I keep threatening to do it. One of these days we'll actually count the number of bikes that come through. First responders are part of this, law enforcement, and a whole lot of volunteer bikers. As I say every time, bikers have been involved right from the get-go. We had our first honor flight that actually took off from Albany. They took off on a chilly morning and escorted the bus down from Plattsburgh to Albany. Let's listen to the sounds of the thunder in the Berg here, beautiful downtown Plattsburgh. parade occasionally slows down as the bikers and find a place to park, and they're parked right to our right now. Here comes the official honor flight bus. Mr. Barber at the wheel. The send-off ceremony starts at 7 a.m. This Thunder in the Bird parade usually arrives at the Oval around 6:30. So if you're planning on coming in the future, those are the timelines you should think about. Temperature right now, as I said, is in the low 60s. Not a bad morning in the North Country. And it looks like they're one last official vehicle, and we'll turn and show you what the parking lot starting to look like here with all these bikers finding their way in. Finding a parking spot is almost a bit of a challenge. So sometimes the parade gets held up as they try to make their way in here. We always try to arrive early so we can have a suitable place to park and escape here as we try to cover this from as many angles as we can. About 20 of 7 at the moment, so still getting everything set up. And we have the veterans, a busload of them getting off the official honor flight bus. So veterans and their guardians. And this all began, as we've mentioned so many times, it was mainly to honor the World War II veterans, because their monument was one of the last ones to go up in Washington, D.C. And it was felt that because it took so long that, and they were getting along in years, that maybe the only chance to go there and see their monument was something like this, where an honor flight would take them there along with a guardian to help them along the way if they needed assistance. And whether you need assistance or not, you get a guardian. And the World War II veterans, if you were 18 in 1945 when World War II ended. 1945 is 80 years ago, so you add 18 to that, you're talking 98 years old, so there aren't too many mobile World War II veterans remaining. And then of course the Korean War veterans are just a shade under them in age. So most of the people going, and they, let me point out too, before I forget, they do send people from modern conflicts if there's a need. We've had people that, for medical reasons, needed to go soon, so they have sent people from recent wars, recent veterans to these honor flights. But most of them now are from the Vietnam era, and the Vietnam era was, of course, marred by the protesters. When the veterans came back, people who either voluntarily or were drafted to serve our country, whether they believed in the war or not. They went and served and did their duty. And when they came back, they had to take off their uniforms when they went through the airports because the protesters were there, the people who were anti-war. I don't know anybody who was pro-war, but that group that felt the privilege of humiliating the veterans, they had to, and we've had wounded veterans come back, take off their uniform, and to get through without being harassed. And of course, we've still got people that think harassing is their right, and we've had a recent example of that here in our area, but that's a different subject altogether. You know, take into consideration the people that you're serving. These people that went there, coming back after serving their country and were met with that kind of disrespect. It's an embarrassment. So when you see some of these veterans today, and as they read off their biographies, Tom Halleck does a great job doing that. When they read off their biographies, a lot of them have stories. They probably all have stories, but they don't always share them. But sometimes they do share a little bit of their story about what happened when they returned. So a lot of sad stories in that respect. So having this kind of a turnout and a thank you has been a long time coming, but I know they all appreciate what the people are doing now and the respect that's shown to them. If you know of any veterans who should be considering taking one of these flights, they're always looking to add people to their list. So encourage them to get a hold of the North Country Honor Flight. You can find them on Facebook. I believe they also have a website. So please encourage the veterans that you may know to step up, and most of them are, or at least a lot of them, are kind of humble, and they don't think they necessarily deserve it, but they all deserve it. If they served, they deserve. It's a new catchphrase. I'm gonna copyright that one. If they served, they deserve. So encourage your veterans that you may know to get on the list.
Good morning, North Country, and welcome to Honor Flights 64 and 65.
Try to get where we can see Mr. Finnegan here. Hiding
When these
behind the
veterans
flag.
return home tonight, this North Country will have sent 980 veterans on a trip of a lifetime.
So they'll hit 1,000 in October. This is Barry Finnegan.
Of course, we couldn't do this without a lot of help, and I would like to thank the flight sponsors for today. Post 1618. Yeah.
1618, okay, I got it
That
wrong.
includes the auxiliary, the riders, and the sons. They got help from the Harold Kaiser family in memory of Harold Kaiser, and they got help from Joshua Laware in memory of his father, Bobby Laware. So thanks, 1618. This is the third flight those fellows have sponsored, and just a great supporter. We appreciate it.
Legion Post 1618.
The other sponsor is Lake Champlain Transportation. I wouldn't even know where to begin. They're just incredible. All of our Friday escorts, when we go to pick veterans up, all the ferries are always free, and everybody, all the motorcycles, all the cars that are bringing veterans. Also, whenever we do our cruise, they give us free passage with free buses, both ways, and just a huge amount of money that they've been supporting us for a long time. So thank you, Lake Champlain Transportation. Of course, every flight is very dependent on the flight leaders, and this time we've got two great flight leaders. I'd like to send out a huge thank you to Gina Bond and Fred Woodward for doing such a wonderful job getting these doors prepared. On May 28th, we lost a great man. Mr. John Smith passed away. A lot of people in the North Country know him. He is a great asset to all the people in the North Country. Huge member of the Plattsburgh Lions Club, who have been huge supporters of Honor Flight since the beginning. And John was just a great guy. He spent a year over in sunny Southeast Asia with the 101st Airborne Division. A great veteran, a great person. He's going to be badly missed. And John was one of those guys that, no, I don't want to go. Send the other guys first. You know, let the old guys go. I said, John, I hate to break it to you, but yeah, it's time to go. And he, kept putting it off, saying, I want everybody else to go, and then I'll go. And he actually finally gave in, and we got him scheduled. He was supposed to go today. I say this because just those people that are hesitating to sign up, now's the time. Please, let's not this happen. That's one of our worst nightmares, is someone's on our waiting list and doesn't make it. So please, let's not let that happen. Please sign up, get ready to go, and get your honor flight. Let's not wait till it's too late. And I'm going to turn it over to our Master of Ceremonies, our Executive Officer, Jerica Manning.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us this morning. We stand not just as neighbors and friends, but as a community united in gratitude and respect for the men and women who served our nation, our North Country veterans. Today we come together to thank and recognize 30 more North Country Honor Flight veterans for their service and sacrifice. So thank you for joining us. To begin, please rise and join us in the singing of our national anthem, performed this morning by Vietnam veteran Glenn Miller.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare the bombs bursting in air gave proof to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Glenn Miller.
Please remain standing as I introduce Andrew DeMars, who raised $800 for North Country Honor Flight at his lemonade stand, and he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Way to go, Win.
We would now like to take a moment to recognize and thank the elected officials and dignitaries who are with us today. Senator Dan Steck, former Assemblyman Billy Jones. Through his service, though Assemblyman Jones's service in the North Country as the Assembly has officially ended yesterday, his support for our veterans and the North Country Honor Flight never wavered. Thank you. City of Plattsburgh Mayor Wendell Hughes. Town of Plattsburgh Supervisor Michael Cashman. Clinton County Legislators Calvin Castine, Francis Courier, Dave Bazzaio, and from Franklin County, Sheriff Jay Cook, and Mayor Andrea Dumas. Technical difficulties. We are grateful for all of your presence and your support of our veterans. At this time, please welcome the Morrisonville Elementary Choir performing their original song, Red, White, and Blue.
You bear the sound man here. I point out every time this was a song written years ago by the then group at Morrisonville and Roy Hurd, a well-known area musician and internationally known. should point out this is September 6th, so school's only been in session for 1 or 2 days here, so haven't had a lot of rehearsal
Next,
time.
I would like to invite Gary Liberty forward to pay tribute to the honor flight veterans that we have lost since our last flight.
Also sad duty for Gary.
Good morning. As Barry mentioned, we're trying to get the vets down there. So if you know anybody who is a vet and has yet to sign up, please do that. Since our last flight, we've lost 3 of our veterans. From Flight 30, James Thomas McCardle. From Flight 41, Robert Boswell. And from Flight 54, William Kennedy. So let's pay tribute to these 3. We'll have the gun salute and the bagpipes, but after that, thank you.
And those are the ones who went on the flight. Doesn't count the ones who never made it to the flight.
We are grateful to once again have Larry Aber with us here today. Larry has been a steadfast supporter of North Country Honor Flight, and he will now perform More Than a Name on the Wall.
Thank you all for coming out this morning and honoring our veterans and their families for all the sacrifices that they made so we may enjoy the freedom that we have today. There's 58,000 names on the Vietnam Wall. Somebody here knows somebody, has a friend, has a relative, acquaintance, whose name is on that wall. This next song is for all those names that are there, and for all those named people, veterans who risked their lives to be on that wall. Saw her from a distance as she walked up to the wall. In her hand she held some flowers as her tears began to fall. And she took out pen and paper as to trace her memory. She looked up to heaven, and the words she said were these. She said, Lord, my boy was special, and he meant so much to me. And oh, I love to see him just one more time, you see. All I have are the memories and the moments to recall. So Lord, could you tell him he's more than a name on the wall? Said he really missed the family, being home on Christmas Day. And he died for God and country in a place so far away. I remember just a little boy playing war since he was 3. But Lord, this time I know he's not coming home to me. She said, Lord, my boy was special, and he meant so much to me. And oh, I'd love to see him, but I know it just can't be. So I thank you for your memories and the moments to recall. But Lord, could you tell him he's more than a name on a wall? Lord, could you tell him he's more than a name on the wall? Thank you for your service, veterans. Hope you have a great trip.
Please join me in welcoming my friend Mike Farrell, who will lead us in our closing prayer.
The ceremony is brief because we got a lot of introductions to happen.
Good morning. On December 11, 1941, the United States declared war on Germany and Italy, formally entering World War II. On September 2, 1945, Japan formally surrenders, ending World War II. 2.5 years later, with the implementation of the Truman Doctrine, followed by the Marshall Plan, the Cold War began. And with the collapse of Soviet Union in 1991, the Cold War came to closure. Over those 44 years, our military faithfully stood at the ready. Within that time frame, the United States would engage in 2 wars of containment. From June 1950 to July 1953, the Korean War, and from November 1955 to April 1975, the Vietnam War. Today we celebrate our North Country Honor Flight veterans as they were ones who wore the uniform, stood in the gap, and at the ready. Many of you, upon your return from service, were treated with disregard or even aggression. Today, as a community, we make up for our nation's unconcern for you and your service. Today, as a community, we say thank you. As a community, we honor you. As a community, we gratefully send you to see your memorials. And for our community, I say, Carpe Diem. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the country you have allowed us to live in. Thank you for each of our veterans that raised their right hand with commitment to our Constitution and our countrymen. Thank you for this day to honor them, and may your Spirit touch them with the love as they journey this day. Give them your journey mercies. In Jesus' name I pray. Flight 64 and 65, thank you for your service. Thank you for my freedom. Thank you, and Godspeed.
And now it is my great honor to introduce Mr. Tom Halleck, who will share just a portion of the incredible stories that make up the history of this nation and those who have defended it, the veteran biographies.
Good morning. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you this morning. Let's meet the veterans, beginning with Flight 64. Clement Kuchar, U.S. Army Reserve, 1962 to 1966, and 1974 to 1980, Vietnam. After basic training, Clem was assigned to the headquarters company as a mechanics assistant in the motor pool. His job included transporting troops and supplies for training. Before long, he was promoted to dispatcher, sending others into the field. One vivid memory from October 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis is when the base went on full alert. This was no longer practice, it was real. Everyone was issued full gear and braced for the worst. Thankfully, President Kennedy resolved the crisis peacefully. When Clem decided to re-up, he began teaching medical training on how to handle injured personnel as a first responder. He also remembers one lesson learned the hard way. After going to church after KP duty, he took his time returning. The officer, wise to this trick, handed him a toothbrush and had him scrub every door threshold in the dining hall. Clem never pulled that stunt again. Clement Kuchar. Robert Dwyer, U.S. Navy, 1967 to 1970, Vietnam. After high school, Bob moved to the North Country to attend SUNY Plattsburgh, where he met his future wife, Joanne. He graduated in 1966 and, inspired by his father, a World War II Navy veteran, enlisted in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam War. In 1968, he was accepted into U.S. Naval officer training, where he trained in navigation, weapons, propulsions, and naval warfare. As a lieutenant, Bob led a detachment supporting Navy combat and search and rescue operations in the coastal and inland waters of North Vietnam. He also took part in missions across Southeast Asia, including the Philippines. Joanne and their newborn daughter, Colleen, eventually joined him overseas. During one harrowing trip through the mountains of northern Luzon, they were forced to huddle on the floor of their car to avoid gunfire from bandits chasing them. After his honorable discharge in 1970, Bob returned to Plattsburgh and began a nearly 30-year career with U.S. Customs in Champlain, New York. Robert Dwyer. Wesley Facto, U.S. Navy, 1970 to 1973, Vietnam. Wes enlisted in the Navy and trained as a storekeeper at Great Lakes. His first assignment was the aircraft carrier Shangri-La, where he managed supplies for a 10-and-a-half-month cruise in the Western Pacific. Getting there was a journey. Albany to California, Hawaii, Wake Island, Subic Bay in the Philippines, Vietnam, and finally to the ship by cargo plane. He spent time in Japan during repairs, helped decommission the Shangri-La in Boston, then served on the destroyer Bronson out of Newport, Rhode Island, headed for the Mediterranean. Asked for a memory, Wes laughed. He was told never to eat monkey meat on a stick in the Philippines. So naturally, he did. Not great, he said, but it went down. Wes says his Navy time was awesome, visiting all the places he did and seeing different cultures and people. He says young people should think about joining up. Wesley Factor. Bruce Garland, U.S. Army, 1965 to 1967, Vietnam. Bruce was drafted into the military at the same time as his brother. 3 of the 4 brothers served, with the 4th joining the National Guard. After basic training at Fort Dix, he went to Aberdeen Proving Ground for advanced individual training. There they discovered he was colorblind, so he was assigned to the motor pool, trained as a repairman and truck driver. While in Vietnam, Bruce filled countless sandbags and transported troops. On one trip, a soldier accidentally discharged his firearm in the back of the truck, nearly taking Bruce's rear end off. Thankfully, there were no windshields, or he might have gone right through one. Another close call came on a mountaintop when the wrong grid coordinates were called in. Bruce and his unit heard the incoming shell, held their breath, and were relieved when it landed harmlessly in a nearby rice paddy. Through it all, Bruce was proud to serve his country and did exactly what was asked of him. Bruce Garland. John Glasgow, Jr., U.S. Navy, 1967 to 1971, Vietnam. John joined the Navy Seabees, inspired in part by his brother's service. Unlike traditional sailors, Seabees flew to assignments. John was in construction, building with concrete and steel. During his second tour in 1969, as his unit was leaving base, Hurricane Camille hit. They took shelter in storage buildings, which collapsed around them. John spent 3 grueling days clearing debris and searching for bodies, with no food or showers. A lieutenant in his unit tragically lost his entire family. Later in Da Nang, Vietnam, while constructing ammunition sheds, John fell off a roof onto a pile of rocks. In the hospital, he couldn't stand at first, but 2 days later, driven by sheer will, he rejoined his unit and continued the mission. John considers himself lucky to have made it home and hopes to one day return and see how the places have changed. John Glasgow, Jr. Darrell LeClaire, U.S. Marine Corps, 1967 to 1969, Vietnam. In 1967, Darrell enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps for a 2-year tour. He trained at Parris Island, Camp Lejeune, and Camp Pendleton before deploying to Vietnam. In Phu Bai, he was assigned to Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Marine Division. Darrell fought in multiple operations, including the brutal Battle of Hue City during the Tet Offensive. Darrell was wounded 3 times, twice by shrapnel, once by gunfire, and was awarded 3 Purple Hearts, among other honors. In 1974, Darrell received the Conspicuous Service Cross from New York State, presented by Senator Ronald Stafford. But for Darrell, medals don't tell the story. The real weight of war is in the friends he made and the 3 he lost. Those bonds run deep, and the pain runs deeper. As Darrell told us, I have no stories to tell. Some memories hurt too much to speak. Darrell LeClaire. Ronald LaFountain, U.S. Army, 1974 to 1977, Vietnam. Ron enlisted in the Army at 17 after his hesitant father signed off. After basic training, he went to Fort Gordon, Georgia for military police training, then to Fort Knox, first for corrections, then cross-trained as a road patrolman, similar to state police, where he remained for his entire enlistment. At Fort Dix, he recalls a 3 a.m. scare when his drill instructor ordered everyone to pack for Vietnam. They stood in the rain, bags in hand, only to be told it was a false alarm. 3 men went AWOL that night. At Fort Knox, during a gold vault alert, tanks tore across the golf course to respond. The colonel refused to use the phone to cancel the alert, so Ron did it for him. Ron worked in the provost marshal's office and was part of the military police squad that conducted criminal investigations, while also developing programs to prevent and reduce crime. Ronald LaFountain. Florence DeClario Fredette, Veteran Guardian, U.S. Army, 1982, Cold War. The path that led Flo to the Army recruiter isn't as important as what she gained from the experience. Discipline, honor, strength, and courage. At Fort Dix, basic training pushed her beyond her limits, and she rose to the challenge, ready to serve her country. But an injury brought her training to an early end. Though she was honorably discharged, the soldier in her remained. While awaiting discharge, Flo was assigned as a company truck driver, transporting troops to the arsenal, the range, the mess hall, and the barracks. The gratitude she received from fellow soldiers and the time behind the wheel sparked a lifelong love for trucks. She returned home a changed and disciplined woman, carrying the values of military life into civilian life. Today, being of service to others remains her greatest honor. Florence DeClario, Fredette. Everett Plumidor, U.S. Navy, 1976 to 1981, Cold War. After his brother Howie called a Navy recruiter, Everett got a call from the Seabees. They gave him 3 days to decide. He went home, then to the bar. After a 6-pack, he said yes. Everett enlisted under the Delayed Entry Program and went to Great Lakes, where he trained and worked briefly as a dental technician. In Gulfport, Mississippi, he trained as a mechanic and joined the Amphibious Construction Battalion, doing mechanic work, loading ships, practicing beach landings, where the average life expectancy in combat is just 3 seconds. While stationed at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, working in public works, Everett met Joanne. They'll celebrate 44 years of marriage this year. Everett says everything about his service was special, and he enjoyed it all. His last battalion still holds reunions every 2 years. Everett Plumidor. Joanne Plumidor, Veteran Guardian, U.S. Navy, 1978 to 1984, Cold War. Joanne enlisted in California and began basic training in Orlando, Florida, followed by broadcast journalism training at Fort Benjamin Harrison. Her first assignment was at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where she prepared news from the teletype for broadcast, each word chosen carefully, knowing other countries were listening. She then served in Sigonella, Italy, and later the Azores. Before that move, she married Everett, who eventually joined her overseas. Joanne's service brought unique experiences. While filming a documentary, she jumped from a helicopter with a full-size camera on her shoulder. A risky move she loved, though she never got to see the final cut. Another time, while scuba diving, she accidentally swam from the enlisted beach into the officers' area and was quickly redirected. Her time in the military combined skill, adventure, and a touch of humor, hallmarks of a remarkable career. Joanne Plumidor. Howard Plumidor, U.S. Navy, 1974 to 1978, Vietnam. Howie's dad couldn't afford college, so he told him to join the service. By 6th grade, Howie already knew that's what he was going to do. His guidance counselor, Mr. Toy, asked him what he wanted to be. Howie said without hesitation, military. In boot camp, he landed a cushy job as the battalion's master-at-arms. He wore a white belt and got perks like being first in the chow line. Assigned to the USS Ranger, CD-61, Howie operated 2 massive 1,200-pound superheated boilers and managed the catapults that launched the aircraft. One proud moment, he was honored on the bridge and given the rare chance to steer the ship. He got to pilot it for exactly 5.3 nautical miles. Fittingly, the U.S. Ranger was commissioned on August 2nd, 1954. Howie was born the very next day, August 3rd. It was like fate. They belonged to each other. He served 4 years aboard her, and when the time comes, his gravestone will say just that. Howard Plumidor. Mark Plumidor, U.S. Navy, 1979 to 1982, Cold War. Mark's father was an Army man who told his sons to join the Navy instead. His mother said, pick a job where you'll never go hungry. So Mark became a cook. He trained with Company 170 at Great Lakes, then served as a mess management specialist in the S-2 division aboard the USS Enterprise, which was dry docked. He handled rehab work, prepping spaces for painting and tiling. But in 1981, Mark did something far greater. While heading back to the ship with his friend, seaman apprentice Kelly lost his balance and fell into the freezing waters of Puget Sound. Without thinking twice, Mark swam and rescued Kelly just before he slipped beneath the surface and pushed him onto a floating log, holding him up until help arrived. Mark didn't just serve his country, he saved a life. Mark Plumidor. Conrad Purick, U.S. Navy, 1966 to 1970, Vietnam. Conrad enlisted in the Navy because they had the best schools. After basic training, he served a year on the USS Dixie. He volunteered for the underwater demolition team and became a frogman, completing a wet, cold, sleepless hell week, one of just 53 graduates out of 150. Only the smallest and toughest were chosen. So Conrad served on a tiny boat called Project Dart, surveying rivers and taking photos with an $8,000 camera. It was very dangerous. After 2 tours, Conrad returned to Plattsburgh and became a pipe fitter. He recently visited a Navy buddy in Colorado, keeping strong the bonds of service. Once, while wearing a SEAL team shirt, someone told him, if you're going to wear that, you better have earned it, not just be an imposter. And Conrad had. Conrad Purick. Gary Rickett, U.S. Navy, 1966 to 1968, Vietnam. Gary enlisted while still in high school. The day after graduation, he headed to Brooklyn, and from there to his home port in Newport, Rhode Island. Serving as a signalman, he specialized in ship-to-ship communication, using Morse code and flashing light signals. Though never in a war zone, Gary spent 2 years aboard the USS Richard Krause, traveling throughout Europe, the North Atlantic, and the Caribbean. But a brush with trouble at age 13 came back to haunt him. To access top secret communications, Gary needed special clearance, including 5 character references. The FBI had to investigate his teenage record before finally approving his clearance, which they did. Gary loved the Navy and had planned to re-enlist, but back home, a chance run-in with his friend Bob Williams made him reconsider. 90 days flew by, and with them, his Navy chapter quietly came to a close. Gary Rickett. William Terry, U.S. Marine Corps, 1970 to 1972, Vietnam. Bill was drafted into the Army, but during basic training, his drill sergeant called formation and ordered every 5th man to step forward. Bill did, and just like that, he became a Marine. He completed basic training at Parris Island, then went on to Fort Geiger for machine gun training. Shortly afterward, Bill was deployed to Cuba to help protect the U.S. line, followed by a posting in Panama. His service later took him across Europe, Spain, Portugal, Greece, Italy, and Turkey, where he trained alongside European forces. He saw this as one of the great rewards of military life, experiencing different cultures and people firsthand. Bill remembers one moment during training when a drill instructor asked him where he was from. New York, he replied. Where in New York, the instructor asked. Near the Canadian border, Bill answered. Well then, the instructor said, your name is Bill Canada. And sure enough, the nickname stuck with him throughout his time in the service. William Terry. Leo Villeneuve, U.S. Navy, 1964 to 1968, Vietnam. Leo grew up in Moose Creek, Ontario. While visiting his sister in Potsdam, he and a buddy decided to enlist in the U.S. Navy. As a Canadian, Leo needed a green card, which the Navy helped sponsor. After a few months working with the U.S. consulate in Montreal, he was in. Following basic training, Leo headed to Texas and then California to become a construction electrician. His first assignment took him to the Caribbean, then to Vietnam, where he served 2 tours. Unlike many, Leo deployed with his entire construction battalion, the Seabees. He worked in Da Nang, Chu Lai, Quang Chi, and Dong Ha, eventually becoming head electrician. Though he didn't see direct combat, he was always close enough to carry a weapon. The skills he gained in the Navy led to a successful electrical business in New York State. But for Leo, one of the greatest takeaways was the lifelong friendships forged during his time as a Seabee. Leo Villeneuve. That is Flight 64. Now, Flight 65. Stanley Abramczyk, Jr., U.S. Air Force, 1963 to 1986, Vietnam. Stan planned to join the Navy, but fate stepped in. The only recruiter there that day was from the Air Force. He pitched aircraft maintenance, and Stan never looked back. For 23 years, he loved what he did, re-enlisting again and again because it never felt just like a job. He trained at Lakeland Air Force Base, then served in places like Goose Bay, Stewart Air Force Base, Thailand, Laredo, Selma, Keys, Germany, and finally Plattsburgh. Though he never went to Vietnam, the aircraft he maintained sure did. Promoted to aircraft maintenance superintendent in Germany, he finished his career in Plattsburgh, then stayed on as a civilian for 7 more years until the base closed. Stan took real pride in his work. Whether on the flight line or during deep inspections, keeping those planes mission ready gave him purpose and pride, knowing that he helped keep them flying. Stanley Abramczyk, Jr. Richard Baker, U.S. Navy, 1960 to 1964, Vietnam. After training as a diesel mechanic at Great Lakes, Dick was stationed on Nantucket Island, Massachusetts, where he maintained generators that powered equipment used to monitor Russian transmissions. His 13 months there passed quickly, and he was transferred to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, known as Gitmo. At Gitmo, Dick described himself as a dry land sailor, though he also worked on tugs and ferries. He vividly recalled going on high alert during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when his wife was immediately evacuated, and again following President Kennedy's assassination. He also remembered when Cuba shut off the base's water supply, and Navy ships had to produce drinking water. When it came time to re-enlist, Dick requested a post in Japan, Italy, or Scotland. The Navy offered a destroyer out of Boston. He declined, saying simply, "I left." He liked his time in the service and made some great friends. Richard Baker. Stephen Byrd, U.S. Air Force, 1970 to 1975, Vietnam. After initial training, Steve was assigned to Lowry Air Force Base in Colorado to become a nuclear weapons specialist. His first post was in Duluth, Minnesota, with a tactical unit monitoring nuclear activity in extreme cold. He often worked outside to ensure weapons were clean, secure, and fully functional. No one wants to be hit by a dirty bomb, he says. He was later stationed at a NATO base on Peloponnese Peninsula in Greece. The base, once a German facility during World War II, still had bullet holes in the walls. Always armed with an M16, Steve faced constant threats from a neighboring country rumored to be after nuclear material. Steve recalls the job as one of high risk and constant tension, where every task demanded precision, and even the smallest error could lead to disaster. Stephen Burke. Bruce Carter, U.S. Marine Corps, 1964 to 1968, Vietnam. Bruce left Montreal on a Greyhound bus to join the Marines. He arrived at Paris Island after midnight, and as soon as he stepped onto the footprints, the drill instructor barked, "You maggots woke me up." That was just the beginning. Bruce worked in transportation, escorting convoys. In 1965, while en route to Okinawa, Typhoon Trix delayed their journey. He trained in guerrilla warfare, sailed to Da Nang, and ended up in Chula. One night, while on a listening post in a foxhole with a buddy, they wrote a letter to President Johnson about mail delays in Vietnam. Bruce was surprised to get a response, assuring that the problem was being fixed. He valued the discipline the Marines instilled and still attends reunions. Asked if he'd do it again, he'd sign up in the New York Minute. After 31 years and 5 days, Bruce retired, back at the same Greyhound bus company where his journey began. Bruce Carter. John Ellsworth, U.S. Army, 1965 to 1967, Vietnam. John was drafted into the Army during a time of great uncertainty. His father, a farmer, received a deferment to stay home and support his family. After basic training at Fort Dix, John went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where he trained in heavy artillery. Then, after a short leave at home, he was deployed to Vietnam. In Vietnam, he drove a truck through the rugged Central Highlands, hauling ammunition and troops. The roads were dangerous, often targeted by enemy fire. Once his truck hit a landmine near the edge of the road. It blew out a dual wheel, but they chained it up and kept moving. John has deep respect for the infantrymen he served alongside. He spent the year in Vietnam constantly on alert, knowing danger was always close. Looking back, he says he would do it all again and feels incredibly lucky to have made it home. John Ellsworth. Randolph Cannell, U.S. Air Force, 1960 to 1980, Vietnam. Rand enlisted in the Air Force and left for basic training even before attending his high school graduation. He trained as an admin clerk in Amarillo, Texas. and after a few years in Japan, he returned to the U.S. and cross-trained as a safety officer, a role he held for the rest of his 20-year career. One of his most challenging assignments was at Vinh Thuy Air Base in Vietnam, where he served as the sole safety officer, managing frequent incidents on his own. He later served as a safety technician and superintendent at bases across the U.S. and around the world. In 1985, Rand was named Outstanding Safety Manager of the Year. In 1992, he became the first recipient of the Air Force Safety Career Professional Award for his work in mishap prevention. After retiring, he continued his safety work as a civilian. Rand says he'd do it all over again. He loved serving and the chance to see the world. Randolph Cannell. Alexander Innes, U.S. Army, 1978 to 1983, Cold War. Alex began his military journey at Fort Benning, Georgia for basic training, then moved on to Fort Lewis, Washington for the 2nd Battalion of the 75th Ranger Regiment. His first 18 months were spent in rigorous training, starting in law enforcement, then transitioning to the elite Airborne Rangers, where he earned his parachutist badge after multiple jumps. He vividly remembers the grueling Yakima mountain hike, designed to push soldiers to their limits and weed out the unfit. Though Vietnam had just ended, Alex's entire service was focused on readiness, training exclusively at Fort Lewis. His dedication left a lasting mark. His younger brother, 7 years his junior, credits Alex as his reason for enlisting and going on to serve 20 years. Alex looks back on his time in the Army with pride and encourages young people to consider the military, saying it has so much to offer. Alexander Innes. Gregory Levine, U.S. Marine Corps, 1967 to 1974, and U.S. Coast Guard, 1977 to 1990, Vietnam. Greg enlisted early with his mother's permission, but was initially rejected for flat feet. He persisted, got cleared by a doctor in Albany, and trained at Parris Island as a rifleman, later becoming a stealth sniper. Too young for combat, he was sent to Arizona, where a prank with rattlesnakes left him unconscious and hospitalized for 3 days. Just after turning 18, Greg deployed to Vietnam near Dong Ha. He and his spotter were inseparable until a rocket strike took his partner's life just moments after Greg woke him for watch. A loss he still carried. Exposed to Agent Orange while clearing vegetation around camp, Greg continues to battle its effects. After Vietnam, he joined the Coast Guard, installing electronics on towers and ships, his tallest reaching 1,370 feet. For his courage and sacrifice, Greg was awarded multiple honors, including the Marine Corps Vietnam Medal for gallantry. Gregory Levine. George McLaughlin, U.S. Air Force, 1965 to 1968, Vietnam. Drafted into the Army, George quickly realized the Air Force might suit him better, so he enlisted there instead. After basic training, he was sent to Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas, where he trained as a teletype operator in a special security unit, decoding classified messages from intercepted signals. Next, in Cujo Key, Florida, he continued his top-secret communication works on a Navy base. After 18 months, George was deployed to the Baltic Sea in Turkey, just 90 miles from the Russian border. There, he intercepted and decoded sensitive information, forwarding it to Intelligence Command. His final posting was at Kelly Air Force Base in Texas. While in Turkey, George, an avid bowler, applied for a tournament in Germany. Not only did he compete, but he won the singles championship, adding a personal victory to his military accomplishments. George McLaughlin. William Meigs, U.S. Army, 1969 to 1977, Vietnam. Bill received a draft letter from President Lyndon Johnson and entered the Army. completing basic training before being assigned to Fort Meade, Maryland as a truck driver with the 6th Armored Cavalry. At the time, his brother was serving in Vietnam, which initially spared Bill from deployment overseas. He remained at Fort Meade while others shipped out. That changed when his brother returned from Vietnam in December 1969. The following month, Bill received orders to deploy. He was sent to Long Binh, Vietnam, where he served with the 3rd Ordnance Battalion for 10.5 months. Most of his time there was spent operating a forklift, loading ammunition on the trucks headed for the front lines. As President Nixon began drawing down troop numbers, Bill was sent home. He says the best part of his service was making some wicked good friends. After active duty, he continued to serve in the Vermont National Guard with the 131st Engineers for another 6 years. William May. Robert Moffett, U.S. Navy, 1960 to 1966, Vietnam. After Great Lakes, Bob was stationed in Jacksonville, Florida, assigned to the aircraft carrier Shangri-La. Though he and fellow Flight 64 member Wes Facto both served on the Shangri-La, their tours were at different times. As a boatswain's mate, Bob helped maintain the massive ship and traveled extensively with a large convoy of destroyers, cruisers, and submarines to England, Iceland, Greenland, and throughout the Mediterranean. While on board, 2 planes were lost, and one incident nearly cost Bob his life. While resting behind a large I-beam, a landing aircraft struck him. The beam bent from the impact, but didn't touch him. Despite the dangers, Bob finally recalls roller skating around Jacksonville and the men he served alongside. It was lots of fun. Robert Moffett. Michael Moselle, U.S. Army, 1962 to 1965, Vietnam. Michael enlisted in the U.S. Army and trained at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a heavy equipment operator, specializing in crane operations. He was then stationed at Camp Leroy Johnson in New Orleans, where he spent a year, half of it on TDY, training reservists on equipment use. France and Paris came next. Upon arrival, he discovered, though, there were no cranes. Because he could type, the Army reassigned him as company clerk in the orderly room, a post he held for a year and a half. He recalls when President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, and his base went on high alert. While in France, he befriended his captain, a 5'7", 305-pound Army wrestling champion, who often invited Michael out for their mutual favorite, Mexican food. Michael Moselle. James Purcell, U.S. Army, 1967 to 1969, Vietnam. Jim had a choice, be drafted or go to Canada. He came from a family of veterans. His father was a Navy Seabee in World War II, and his grandfather flew in World War I. After boot camp, Jim deployed to Vietnam as a combat engineer. While stationed at Tai Ninh, his unit was sent to repair a road destroyed by the Viet Cong. That day, a command-detonated charge hit the 3rd truck in their convoy, killing his best friend, Michael McLean, who later received the Purple Heart. Jim still hopes to honor him someday. Returning home in 1969, Jim didn't wear his uniform, afraid of being called a war criminal. It was 10 years before anyone said, "Welcome home." Still, he carried himself with quiet dignity, proud of his service, even if the world wasn't ready to see it. James Purcell. Stephen Shanley, U.S. Army, 1969 to 1971, Vietnam. After basic and advanced infantry training at Fort Dix, Steve deployed to Vietnam for a 12-month tour. After landing in Saigon, he underwent 10 days of in-country training where he was bluntly told, "Forget everything you learned in the U.S. This is how it's done in Vietnam." He was first assigned to the 82nd Airborne Infantry Division, tasked with flushing out enemy forces, often engaging in intense firefights. When they left Vietnam in 1969, Stephen was reassigned to the 1st Cavalry Air Mobile Division. There, he flew over 25 helicopter combat assault missions into hostile areas, facing close quarters combat in search of the Viet Cong. Steve is highly decorated, having earned the Bronze Star Medal, the Vietnam Service Medal with 2 Bronze Service Stars, the Vietnam Campaign Medal with 60 devices, and the Vietnam Gallantry Cross with palm. Stephen Shea. Veterans, have a great flight. You have our gratitude for your service and sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to all of you who joined this morning's ceremony. In just a few moments, our veterans and motorcade will circle the oval before leaving for the hangar. Please give them a true North Country send-off as they pass by. And remember, tonight around 8:30, our veterans will return home. The welcome home ceremony will take place right here at the oval. We hope you can join us to provide them with a warm, patriotic welcome they deserve. Thank you for being here today for flights 64 and 65 of the North Country Honor Flight. God bless America, and God bless our veterans.
All right, 980 veterans as of today have been given an honor flight, courtesy of the North Country Honor Flight. To point out the bagpipers were unable to be here today. And Mayor saying hello, all the way from Malone. Larry Douglas racing over to talk to some of his cohorts, and it's always a great day. There's Bob Dwyer, a fine viewer supporter here. Nice to see Bob going on the flight along with a friend Dick Baker and so many others. So I'm going to relocate as the bus gets in position and family members come over to bid their farewell, and folks heading on the trip. There are 2 buses, of course, that'll take them to the Plattsburgh Air Force Base. So that's some bikers taking off. I guess they're ready to start this parade. It's already started. Not sure what that was all about, but we're set here for what will be the official exit from the Oval. They've given Judy Castine the camera. She'll be covering them before I get there, because what's happened in the recent past is the entourage has been so long that they're not all out of here, and they're already completely circling the Oval and leaving. So she'll get him, and then I will grab her camera. I'm going to move because we got people blocking our view here. The second bus looks like it is loaded. So it looks to me like both buses are loaded. We're waiting for the official go-ahead signal. State police bike will lead it off. Like last time, I had somebody again blocking my view, so I'm going to try to adapt. I guess they wouldn't know where to go if he wasn't pointing them in the right direction here. are off. Okay, this will wrap up the exit onto the oval. We're now going to pick it up and finish the video with Judy's camera. We have to warn you, as soon as we switch over to Judy's camera, she doesn't have this external mic in her camera, so it's going to be a little bit louder when we switch over right now. Okay, the volume should have gone down a little bit as I plug my microphone into Judy's camera. Looks like she decided to get it up close and personal with her view. The buses are coming into view. As I have probably said a couple of times, we're very honored to have been at every send-off, every North Country honor flight. As Judy turns and watches the state police vehicle exit, we'll thank you for watching and supporting viewer-supported local television, Hometown Cable. And again, it's our pleasure our privilege, I should say, to cover these type of events, and I want to thank you for watching.